Let us move on to our final presentation of the day. We are going to now shift, and I'm sure you've already been talking about this, but propose solutions to building this and growing and diversifying this energy efficiency workforce. So Dr. Brian Deal, Executive Director of SEDAC, will present our findings and solutions to building a more equitable workforce. And if you'd like to learn more about Dr. Deal, his bio will be in the document, in the chat document for bios. But welcome, Dr. Deal. We're excited to have you speak today.
Thanks, Cassie. And I know we're all getting tired at the end, but I really do appreciate the participation and the conversations that we've had. And I think it's been a terrific day. And so what I'm going to talk about is to summarize some of the things that we've been discussing and think about the path forward. And the path forward is, how do we deal with these questions and what kinds of programs might we envision that can deal with some of the issues that we've raised and that you've raised over the course of the day. These are the stakeholders that we've been talking about in general here, and we're going to lump them together into 3 for convenience. But we have job seekers, the job training programs, and the employers. This is our fundamental groups, and I'll go through talking about each one of them in more detail. So the consensus is that the connections between these groups are not strong enough. There are connections and there are programs, and we've talked about some of them in my group especially. We talked about some of the things that are happening, but somehow the connections aren't strong enough to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish, and they're not strong enough to hit that 8% job growth, and they're not strong enough in terms of the training programs and pushing people out. They're not strong enough to accomplish, what the employers need. They're finding it difficult to get people in the door. And so what we're going to discuss a little bit here is ways to deal with these connections. And so we've heard these concerns, and I'm not going to spend too much time on them, but we have a lack of awareness. Generally, people are stumbling into the job market. One of the people in my group has an environmental science background, and she is really keen on the job of energy efficiency, but she kind of stumbled into it by mistake, which turns out to be, not by mistake, I should say, but she stumbled into it, it wasn't intentional. And I think that's becoming more the norm. The training pathways aren't clear. It's not clear how to get into the arena in the first place. One of the other issues we heard was the lack of diversity. So these programs are struggling to recruit certain types of people, and certain groups are being left out of the energy efficiency arena. Many report low enrollments. There's lots of barriers to that Dr. Jarrett mentioned that need to be overcome on that front. We also heard of the skills and training gaps between the employers and the training groups. So we don't have feedback. The employers aren't necessarily finding the job seekers that they need. They're not ready to go. The training programs maybe aren't filling the needs that the employers have. So stronger connections are needed to recruit and to engage. So how do we go about strengthening these connections? I mean, the goal is to put these groups together and to grow this energy efficiency workforce with lots of different people, a really diverse group of people. And how might these stronger connections facilitate this goal? So we need to fill this training gap, the gap between the employers and the trainers. I talked about that, and the needs that the employers have. We need some kind of coordination and feedback between employers and trainers. We need to be able to tell the training programs, here's what we need. The employers need to be able to articulate it in the first place, and then the programs need to be nimble enough to address those questions and to produce those kinds of people. So we need to facilitate the conversations. And the way I envision this is peer-to-peer learning. I find it to be so critical for most everything, is that if you can hear from somebody who's been through the things that you're currently experiencing, you learn a lot. I learned a lot from the colleagues who came before me. I learned a lot about how to manage my job, how to deal with some of the things that I deal with. And that peer-to-peer learning can be really effective for employers to help them learn how to articulate what they need, how to figure out, where to find the people that they need, and how to articulate to the training programs the kinds of people that they have. So we're thinking about articulating these roundtable discussions where collaboratives, I might call them collaboratives, but where the peer-to-peer learning starts to take shape. And from that peer-to-peer learning, these needs become articulated and easier then to address. And I think that this peer-to-peer thing works in all three groups. It's not just the employers, but the training programs also need to talk to each other about what they're doing. Here's the employers giving us a 5-year, say, outlook on the kinds of jobs that are coming up, and the training programs and then need to talk to each other about who's doing what and how are we addressing those questions and what might our role be in producing job seekers who can fulfill those jobs. And the CBOs can help a lot with this. CBOs can help a lot in raising awareness with job seekers, initiating that kind of collaborative conversation between seekers. But to me, that's also really important. The job seekers learn from each other. Here's how I did. Here's how it worked for me. Those are really important learning exchanges. It's not always the professor standing about professing how to do something. It's here's how it worked for me. Those are really important conversations to have. And we need the connection between the seekers and employers, and ultimately is what we're talking about. So the training programs are getting them ready, and the employers then need to be able to articulate the kinds of people. We talked about that already. And the CBOs need to be able to find those kinds of people who can fill those kinds of positions, sometimes directly and sometimes through these training programs. So this is what's needed, is this middle piece, these workforce coordinators and CBOs coordinating activities and smoothing the connections. As I said, these people exist and these places exist, but maybe the connections aren't quite strong enough, that there's not a central way to coordinate some of this stuff. So we're trying to address this, and our job was to do the research on this and to try to figure out how to go about thinking about it. Not only how to go about thinking about it, but then how to address some of the issues that we found. And here's what we're proposing. We're proposing a pilot program that will start to address some of these questions, and we're hoping that it flourishes and has legs and becomes sustained over time. But we're talking about dealing with the questions that have been raised throughout the day, addressing the gaps in awareness, increasing the coordination among the employers, trainers, and seekers, enhancing the communication across the current system. As I said, the system is there. Sometimes maybe it needs a little bit of a tweak here and there to make it work better. And then augmenting some of the other initiatives that are going on and making the awareness of some of the other things become clearer. I think it'll help a lot in terms of articulating the kinds of jobs that are needed down the road. So this is the focus of our work, our proposal. We're targeting specific groups, clearly the ones that we've been talking about today, underrepresented groups, and other groups like formerly incarcerated individuals, people who are really experiencing these barriers that we've been talking about. Both of these groups, I think, are really critical for success. And our group talked about potential ways to deal with each one of those groups. And I know most of the other groups probably had similar conversations, but we see short-term and long-term interventions are needed. Some of them, we have this problem right now, especially in the COVID era. Making these connections can be even more difficult and more tedious. And so we need to fill those short-term things. Where are the stresses right now? How do we deal with those stresses in terms of putting people in position to succeed? And then building that long-term pipeline, what's coming down the line? How do we deal with that question? And after that, and after that, and after that. So we need to put in place this critical infrastructure to make this whole system work better and sustain itself. That's our goal. And it might look something like this theoretically, is that we're going to put something in the center here that's going to help move things along. So we have these collaboratives where we talk about peer-to-peer learning. but then some entity, and we're hoping a program like this can do it, it needs to take that information from the employer and make the job seekers aware of it. We need to take it from the employer and make the training programs aware of it. We need to connect the job seekers to these training programs, say, look, in a couple of years, you're going to be ready for this kind of job. And these kinds of jobs are the jobs that are going to be out there and ready for you. So we need to make all of that clearer and more obvious and grease the skids a little bit, identifying and supporting and raising awareness and the questions that we've discussed. So but the overall goal is to grow this workforce, make the stresses, reduce the stresses on all three of these groups by group communication and other devices. So the process that we're proposing is in 7 steps. One of it is as I talked about already, this peer-to-peer learning and outreach. So connecting these groups to themselves first. What's going on in each one of these arenas, and how do we learn from each other? I think those are really important parts of it. In my personal career, you know, I find that student-to-student learning is just as important, if not more important, than what I say in the classroom. That they learn so much from this other perspective of another person saying it to them in a slightly different way, sometimes can have really big impact, especially if they're peer individuals. The second is to go to places, and we think it has to be done regionally, but go to specific places and regions and figure out what's going on. So those peer-to-peer exchanges help us to forecast what's happening. Here's the things that are happening. Here's the trends. Here's the types of jobs that are coming up. Here's the wind energy stuff is really picking up in this county. You know, it really needs to be addressed. There's lots of jobs available in this arena. And then we need to work with the community-based organizations to help find the job seekers. The community organizations typically have their ear to the ground and they understand their place and their region. And we would depend on them a lot to help us to identify those seekers and put the seekers in the room for that peer-to-peer learning, also to connect them with the training programs and physically directly to the employers. The community engagement work is critical for this, and that's that working with the CBOs to engage the community in these conversations, recruiting, etc. And then the training part, and I've already discussed, but working with the trainers in that region to start to shape their programs to aim at the kinds of jobs that are coming up and the kinds of jobs that are both there in the short term and then the long-term prognosis for jobs. You know, the solar outlook is so incredibly strong right now, and some of the other stuff in terms of efficiency, Ameren has a lot of energy efficiency programs, and they need people that can supply and participate in these programs. And then the training support, things that actually we're pretty good at is that educational piece and supporting these programs and the trainees, help them find jobs and internships and help the training programs to modify their offerings to address some of the weaknesses or gaps that we're finding. And for us, you know, a process of evaluation provides that feedback back to the system to say, you know, here's what's working, here's what's not working, here's the other things that need to happen. That part is critical. So a constant process of evaluation and feedback so that we continue to improve what we do and how it works. So that's what we're proposing. And that's generally the way we think we might go about it. We obviously are looking for feedback on this, the same way we look for feedback on what we found in terms of the barriers and the training program gaps and the diversity problems. So we're also looking for feedback on this. And the next section, I think, or the next discussion, we're hoping to get your input on how we're thinking about this.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. And I think we have Angie that wants to hop in and say something really quickly to the group as well.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Angie Ostaszewski, and I'm with the Ameren, Illinois team working on the Market Development Initiative. So I know we're nearing the end of the day. We really appreciate everyone providing their feedback. This last session is extra crucial because we really want your feedback on the design of this pilot. For us, this process needs to be inclusive and equitable, and we want to capture not just your insights and expertise, but also your hopes and aspirations for what our communities can look like in the future. So I don't want to stand between everyone in the last breakout, so I'll just briefly say we're very excited to continue this work and launch this pilot. We have 25 partnerships in place, 25 plus, that we are leveraging to support these efforts. We want everything to work together, and our success is built on partnerships with many of the organizations that are on this call today. So whether it's in this pilot or otherwise, if you'd like to be involved in this work, please go to the website shown here, get in touch with me after the call. Our success is together through our collaboration. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And again, we really, really appreciate your feedback.
Thank you so